Happy Friday, June 16th. Time for a morning story. And yes, usually I go on a jog first, but it is still too cold outside. 57 degrees. It's feeling like November or March. So we'll wait and read our story first. Hidden Figures. Yes, remember Octavia Spencer and all those other ladies. The true story. This is the true story, not the actresses. Of 4 black women and the space race. This is by Margot Lee Shetterly. She's a best-selling author, according to the New York Times, and illustrated by Laura Freeman. Cool colors. Let's represent. Oh, look at this. Their outfits. I tell you, bad women. That's our legacy, y'all. Let's do some great things. Okay. Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden were good at math. Really good. In 1943, the United States was at war. World War II. Yep, in 43, Dorothy Vaughan wanted to serve her country by working for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the government agency that designed airplanes. Having the best airplanes would help America win the war. Making airplanes fly faster and higher and safer meant doing lots of tests in the agency's Langley laboratory in the Hampton, Virginia area. Tests meant numbers. Numbers meant math. And math meant computers. Listen, guys, I had this conversation last night with some colleagues, and we were talking about a pre-med program at a university and how 50 students would start out. And, you know, they had high hopes, but they were not a lot of times prepared. And out of the 50, they had to go through so many classes, right? The microbiology, the chemistry classes. And then by the time from freshman year to junior or senior year, you might have 10 people left. And then life happens, whatever, and only 8 would graduate. And a lot of times, and I asked the question, how many from the 50 initially started, you know, as freshmen, were they able to go into those high math level classes? Because a lot of times they have to, you know, take those 0 level classes, developmental classes, and there's a great percentage. But my argument was the math actually starts in middle school. Yes, 5th, 6th grade, they have to have those math skills, and then to be able to take the 8th grade algebra, so then in high school that they're programmed right. A lot of times it happens when they're 10, 11 years old. But the beautiful thing is, that's why we read these books, because it's never too late. Because maybe we didn't get it right, you know, as a preteen. But this is inspiration that as long as you have breath, you go for your dreams. Okay, so today we think of computers as machines, but in the 1940s, computers were actual people like Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, and Christine. Their job was to do math. Stick to it if that's really your dream. Because Dorothy was black and a woman, some people thought it would be impossible for her to get a job as a computer. She lived in Virginia, a southern state where laws segregated or kept apart black people and white people. They could not eat in the same restaurants. They could not drink the same water fountains. They could not use the same restrooms. They could not attend the same schools. They could not play on the same sports teams. They could not sit near each other in movie theaters. They could not marry someone of a different race. But Dorothy didn't think it was impossible. She was good at math, really good. If you have that gift, that natural ability, and you cultivate it, everybody has those type of abilities, but we have to shine it and we have to develop it. The person in the background They wrote the song, Hymn of Freedom. Oscar Peterson. Now we know that he was a virtuoso on the piano, born in Canada, and had perfect pitch. But guess what? There was a time where he practiced the piano, etudes and everything, for 6 hours a day. So even though he had a natural gift, he had to polish it daily. What are we willing to do 4 to 6 hours a day? I tell you, and I look at so many children who have these natural gifts, but to be able to cultivate it daily, that takes some rigor, that takes some discipline, that takes some focus. Ooh, it might be hard. Let's keep on being inspired. She knew she was the right person for the job. She applied, and the laboratory offered her a position as a computer. Even though she was really good, she worked hard. At work, blacks and whites were kept apart. The white computers worked in the one building, and Dorothy and the other black computers worked in a different building, in their separate office. Even though they worked on the same kinds of assignments, the black computers and white computers used separate bathrooms and ate in separate lunchrooms. Isn't this ridiculous? But this was reality. Yes, it was. America won the war in 1945, but Dorothy stayed on the job, still trying to make airplanes faster and safer. By 1951, the Americans and the Russians were competing to see who could build the best planes. That meant more experiments and more numbers. Lots and lots of numbers. And more numbers meant the need for more computers. That's when Mary Jackson got a job as a computer at Langley. She worked in a group that tested model airplanes in wind tunnels. A wind tunnel was a machine like a huge metal box with a powerful fan attached. Mary put model airplanes in the wind tunnel and blasted them with air from the fan. This experiment helped her group improve their designs of the models before building full-size airplanes. How about this? Mary wanted to become an engineer, but officials said it was impossible. What? That's why it's so important to encourage our youth and everybody to go into STEM. We have it, STEM or STEAM. Most of the engineers at the laboratory were men. And to become an engineer, Mary needed to take high-level math classes, but she wasn't allowed to go inside the white school where the classes were taught. But Mary was good at math, really good, and she refused to give up. She got permission to enter the school building and take the math classes. Yes, and she earned good grades because she didn't give up. Mary Jackson became the first African-American female engineer at the laboratory. I'm telling you that persistence is within. It's within you. Katherine Johnson was good at math and always asked lots of questions. In 1953, she applied to the laboratory for a computer job and was placed on a team that tested actual planes while they were flying in the air. Their research was used to figure out ways to prevent future plane crashes. In one of her first projects, she learned how to analyze turbulence or dangerous gusts of air. No one knows how many lives her work may have helped save. Katherine Johnson. Katherine wanted to help the group prepare its research reports, so she asked if she could go to meetings with the other experts on her team. Her boss told her it was impossible. Women aren't allowed to attend meetings, he said, but Katherine knew she was as good at math as anyone else, maybe better. She asked him again and again and again. Katherine asked her boss so many times that he finally invited her to the meetings. I love it. Katherine was good at math, really good. And because she thought to be treated the same as the men, she became the first woman in her group to sign her name to one of the group's reports. Beautiful. I tell you, persistence pays. In the 1950s, the Langley Laboratory bought a machine computer that could do math faster than the human computers. At first, these machines made mistakes. Dorothy learned how to program the machines so that they got the right answers. She taught the women in her group how to program the computers too. Of course, when I say the word Langley, I'm thinking about my childhood family church. I think about my grandmothers, both of them, who came to Langley, and this is the name of my church, the first name, and they brought their husbands. Just know that they came from South. My paternal grandmother came from Memphis, Tennessee, and my maternal grandmother came from the Alabama area. Then they migrated to Chicago, and then they found, they started going to the church. They changed the name, but then eventually the name changed to Langley. So every time I say that name now, it's going to have a different connotation. I'm going to remember genius. I'm going to remember tenacity and persistence and excellence. In 1957, Russia launched a satellite known as Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. The United States started building satellites to explore space too. For years, the laboratory had used math to design airplanes. Now it would need math to create spaceships as well. The government decided to change the agency's name from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy told Congress, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." A man on the moon, but the first step to getting a man on the moon was to send an astronaut around the Earth. NASA was going to need to hire more space experts and more people who were good at math. Really good. Hey, come on, y'all. The people at the laboratory had to work together from morning to night to figure out how to send astronaut John Glenn into space and bring him back home to Earth safely. Katherine Johnson knew she could use math to help. "Tell me where you want his spaceship to land, and I'll tell you where to launch it," Katherine told her boss. Katherine helped calculate the trajectories or pathways that rockets traveled through space. She had to plan Glenn's exact route from takeoff in Florida to splashdown in Atlantic Ocean. There was no room for error. No one was better than Katherine at solving these tricky math problems. Days before his mission, John Glenn wanted Katherine to double-check the machine's computer's trajectory calculations to make sure it hadn't made any mistakes. When Katherine said the numbers were correct, Glenn was ready to go on February 20th, 1962. Isn't this ironic? This is when Oscar Peterson wrote the song, Hymn of Freedom, 1962. Oh my goodness. On February 20th, 1962, Glenn blasted off into space, circled the Earth, and made his way home safely. Love it! Talk about some freedom. Meanwhile, laws began to change so that blacks and white students could go to school together. Blacks fought for the right to sit beside whites on buses and to drink from the same water fountains. At the laboratory, blacks and whites computers started working together in the same offices, eating at the same lunch tables, and using the same bathrooms. Black and white moviegoers could sit next to each other in the same theater across the country. People started to think about ways to bring equality to all Americans. Oh my goodness, this is beautiful. Christine Darden was good at math, and she moved electronic computers. She started working at Langley in 1967. Christine wanted to become an engineer, and thanks to Dorothy, Mary, and Katherine, she knew it was possible. Eventually, she became an engineer for supersonic airplanes, planes flying faster than the speed of sound. And she has freckles. Hey. But her first job was to help with NASA's mission to the moon. Do you understand what is within you? Oh my goodness. The people at the laboratory prepared for years to send astronauts to the moon, about 238,900 miles away from the Earth. Finally, on July 20th, 1969, the world watched as the three men arrived at the moon in their Apollo 11 spacecraft. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, said astronaut Neil Armstrong when he stepped onto the dusty surface. But it was also a giant leap for Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, Christine, and all of the other computers and engineers who had worked at the laboratory over the years. The moon landing was a success from takeoff to splashdown, but there was no time to rest. Once NASA landed astronauts on the moon, the people at the laboratory began dreaming of sending humans to other planets such as Mars or Jupiter or Saturn. They started to imagine hyper-fast space planes that could travel around the Earth at 7 times the speed of sound. The next adventure wouldn't be easy and would require lots of tests and lots more numbers. But Dorothy, Mary, Catherine, and Christine knew one thing. With hard work, perseverance, and a love of math, anything was possible. That's what I'm talking about. And then here's a timeline from the Wright brothers, 1903. They made the first powered flight. And then the National Advisory Committee of Aeronautics was formed by the federal government. And then we see, so much. Dorothy started to work at NACA in 1943, where she stayed until 1971. Look at this. Oh my goodness. If you're not, oh my goodness, look at this. Oh, as far as their bios, somehow, well, you have to look them up. Dorothy Johnson Vaughn, Mary Winston Jackson, Catherine Coleman Goebel Johnson, and Dr. Christine Mann Darden. If you are not inspired, I don't know what would make you inspired now. And then, man, I would love to read the author's notes. When I first started working on the original Hidden Figures book, I had no idea it would become a New York best-time seller. But then again, when the first 5 Black women took their places in the West Area Computing Office at the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in 1943, they had no way of knowing that these were the first steps. Those were the first steps would eventually help our country get to the moon. Listen, make sure that your dreams, just shoot as high as you can, and encourage our students to stick to study. Sometimes it takes hours. Sometimes you need to get a tutor, right? Sometimes you have to sacrifice time. Sometimes you're gonna have to turn off those tablets and phones and devices and just get to study. And I tell you, we will have the original genius shine through. So that's for all of us. You're never too old. Maybe you want to become an engineer at 60 or 70 years old. It's never too late. All right? I tell you, someone was still working in their 80s. Well, let's just look at our president. So look, nothing is impossible. We're never too old. So get to moving and let your dreams reach to the moon.